Well, another gloomy day of this thing we call life has come to an end. So let's finish it off with a taste of Glastonbury romance, shall we? Most of the pathetic scenes in almost everybody's life are scenes unnoted by anyone and totally disregarded by the person in question. Such was this moment in Dave's life, when, with his head full of the sighing of these documents at Mark Court, he was pondering on these legends and rumors of Atlantis in connection with his historic experiment in Glastonbury, and all the time wondering against his will whether Zuki intended to cook them any supper. He was successful in rigidly keeping out of his mind every image of Decker bending over Nell in the room above, and of Zoyland bending over Percy in the darkness outside. But as his three candles flickered upon these legends of the drowned continent, he could not prevent his thoughts from running upon baked potatoes and gravy. Twice, while Dave had been reading his book on Atlantis and thinking against his will about potatoes and gravy, Percy came straight up to the window outside where those brown curtains were and peeped in upon him. Being the man's wife, and yet with no essential kindness for him, the girl, when she saw him there, did not feel the least sense of the pathos of that short, flaxen-haired figure with its scholarly earnestness, turning the pages of Atlantis, and every now and then making a pencil note in the margin of the book. Thinking himself completely alone in the candlelit room, Dave gave way to a childish trick that his dead mother had long ago tried to cure him of. A trick of sucking his upper lip and pulling it as far as it would go into his mouth while he licked it with the tip of his tongue. I do that too sometimes. But Percy, while she had grown so familiar with his ways as to take them all for granted, and while she had come to value his opinions so as to accept them as her own, felt towards him no one single kindly human feeling. That's nice, huh? People are so nice in Glastonbury. There he is, reading that book, she had said to herself the first time she peeped in. How his ears do stick out. And the second time she peeped in, it was much the same. There he is, still reading, she thought. How insensitive his hands are. Will Zoyland had not yet forgiven Nell for his humiliation at last night. He had agreed to the precipitate departure of Eudoxia, but there had been no reconciliation between himself and Nell. In fact, very few words of any kind had passed between them since he had carried her bodily up the attic stairs to spare the feelings of Miss Pepper. Aggravated rather than appeased by his protracted alliance with Doxy, Zoyland's senses were irritably on edge after his long summer of celibate virtue. The electric response of Persephone to his careless courtship, for, as we have discovered, to excite a man's desire to the point of desperation was a recurrent aspect of the singular girl's perversity, very quickly heightened this rebellious wantonness into a leaping flame of desire. Nell's unforgiveness over the trifling incident of Eudoxia ranked in the bastard's mind as something extraordinarily unfair. Here was he playing the wittol for Nell's sake, and what was she doing in return? He couldn't blame her for being absorbed in her maternity, but she might at least have been indulgent to his natural and pardonable lapse. As he pulled Percy away from the parlor window, after a second spying upon her husband, he glanced up at the window of the attic and noted by the faint light there that she had only lit one of her bedroom candles. He could hear no sound of the vicar's deep voice either, and he thought to himself, the Padre is holding her hand and rocking the cradle. Pretty family picture. But where do I come in? Will's complacence over the child was, if he had troubled to analyze it, more for the baby's sake than its mother's. His rich animal nature, the lavish temperament of a born outlaw, responded exuberantly to the helplessness of babyhood. He found Henry sweet to his taste, but if a wandering gypsy woman had left a foundling on his doorstep, he would have made the same kind of pet of it. The little golden christening cup, having been handled here and there between parlor and kitchen, and now reposing in peace at the foot of Henry's cradle, had been an added cause of annoyance between Zoyland and Nell. The girl had expressed a desire to have the baby's name engraved on the cup, but this had seemed to William a paltry middle-class addition. Did not the cup already carry the proud falcon of his race? Thus there had been yet more bitter words between them on this head, which added still further to the ranking score of grievances. Well, I have to agree with him. That would be a little tacky. "Come on, sweet one," he now whispered, dragging Persephone away from the house towards the tow path, and this time in an easterly direction. "They don't want us in there. He's plotting revolution, and they're plotting sentiment. We're out of it tonight, you and I, and we'd better make the best of things out of it." Percy had already enjoyed flirting with Zoyland, but they were both in a completely different mood tonight. They were both in the same mood, too, by some fatality, which always means a vibration between men and women full of delicious danger. Is it possible, her incorrigible spirit pondered, that this man is going to do what Phil and Dave couldn't do? This is a glorious moment, anyway. I wish it would last forever. The half-moon, looking waterlogged and laboring like a rudderless ship in the mottled sky, poured down a stream of ambiguous influence upon the swollen river. Too many feminine nerves, of every level of organic life, were draining just then that strange being's vitality, so that the magic touch that fell upon Percy's relaxed limbs as Zoyland dragged her along by the hand was a mere accidental overflow, casual, uncalculated. It gave enough light, however, to guide their steps as they followed the towpath, and the whole nature of that night was such that nothing emphatic or arresting in the elements distracted their attention from each other. He willing and she willing, as Homer says, they speedily receded out of all sight of the cottage. The truth is that women like Nell, absorbed in their motherhood, and men like Dave, absorbed in their politics, will to the end of time throw into each other's arms reckless, restless, irresponsible, wandering stars like Percy and Zoyland. It is upon these strangely neutral nights, such as when this 15th of December, that the real power of darkness as opposed to daylight gathers itself together to assert its essential identity. Complete darkness is usually so empty of all discrimination as to be practically a negation. But darkness faintly touched by a sickly moon has a certain positive character. The absence of high wind or pouring rain, too, enables the mind to receive, in uninterrupted concentration, those simpler emanations of earth life, such as the leap of a fish, the rustling of a rabbit, the cry of a nocturnal bird, the bark of a farm dog, the lowing of a cow in an isolated garden, the faint sighing of reeds, the creaking of a bough, the fall of a twig into a silent pond, the shy stirrings of aimless little night winds amid the dead bracken, which are destroyed and obliterated by the more startling play of the elements. Zoyland paused only once in his predatory stride, and that was to make the girl lean on his arm in place of holding his hand. She was indeed following him so gallantly and with such an easy swing upon the muddy ground that he felt proud of her as a companion. The truth was that in a rough and tumble country walk, Percy, for all her sophistication, would have beaten any woman in Glastonbury except her cousin Mary. It was perhaps the vigorous Norfolk strains in their blood. But whatever it was, no Glastonbury-born girl could have rivaled these two in this. Further and further eastward he led her, for he knew well by this time that he had what he had in his mind. What he was aiming at, and he found it without any trouble, was a spot that had always made him think of just this very contingency, though not necessarily with his present lady. About half a mile from White Lake Cottage there was a reed-thatched shed where the farmer of those fields kept his dry hay. The fields on both sides of the stream belonged to this man just there, and in order to convey his hay across to the cattle on the opposite bank, he kept a flat-bottomed boat tied by rope to an iron stake beneath this hay shed. Zoyland had made use of this boat many a time before, and without leave asked either, for the purpose of shooting wild fowl, and it was now entered his mind that nothing could be more congruous with the hour and the girl than to embrace his present delicious companion, where the waters of the river would be flowing within an inch of their bodies. Percy laughed aloud, a low, merry young girl's laugh of pure mischief, when she found herself laid upon a mattress of hay in this floating bed. Her only desire now, and even that was a languid one, was to put off her final yielding to the bearded man until she had enjoyed to the extreme limit the excited tensions of his craving. How queer it is in my life, she thought to herself, the way the same situation keeps repeating itself. Is it possible that Bristol Wharf, she was thinking of her earlier encounter with Dave, and Wookey Hole, and St. Mary's Ruin, she was thinking of one particular meeting with Angela Beer, and that room in the hospital, she was thinking of the last of her morbid visits to Mr. Evans, were all rehearsals of this breaking of the ice with Will. When a person's life repeats itself, from the shore of Phil's to that boat of Will's, there's a doom of some sort. He may be able to do it. He may. Will, can't you do it? Can't you show poor Percy where her heart is? Oh, find it, darling Will. Touch it, hurt it, bruise it, break it. So long as you show her where it is, poor Percy's lost treacherous heart, that she can never, never, never find. It was well to be believed, with a puritanical amorous like Zoyland, that it was not long before Persephone's body, whatever happened to her heart, belonged, as far as it could belong to anyone, to this Herculean ravisher. In the matter of pure lust, Will did not go half the satisfaction from his taking. He did not get half the satisfaction from his taking of Percy that he got from his dallying with Eudoxia. But in every other respect, aye, how he did enjoy the unqualified circumstances of these violent embraces. Unequaled, not inqualid. I don't think that inqualid's a word, but it's a nice sounding word. And it does seem like a word that John Powys would use, but it's not an actual word, I don't think. He said unequaled. The gurgling of the water beneath this keelless vessel, the rubbing of the rope against the bark of a little bush, the dripping down as it in sympathy with its heathen satisfaction of the whole cloudy heaven, the smell of the river mud, the glittering slide from the high zenith of a falling star in the direction of North Wanton and Crosscombe, and most wonderful of all, and actually simultaneous with the apogee of his delight, the sudden rising of a great broad-winged heron in its heavy retreat over the moonlit marshes towards Waltstone and Hernhouse. All these things gave to the bastard sensuality that sort of romantic elemental margin, which was the thing of all things that he relished most in the world. Thus it may be imagined in what a mood of tender gratitude he took Percy back, holding her hand tight, very tight, and repeatedly kissing it. As he moved along, he thought to himself, girls really ought to be allowed everything they want in the world when they can give a person such entrancing pleasure. He felt in a delicious mood now, at peace with man and at peace with God. And he would have got home in this mood if it not had been, as he approached the house, that he caught sight of a particular branch of a particular tree which he had noted. It was blasted by lightning, while the Marquis was telling him of the sale of the factories and of the leasing of the shops. Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your gloomy day today, or whatever the weather's like in your neck of the woods. Till next time, God bless.